Okay, peeps, to kick off this installment of the High Noon series from somewhere deep into the future, I should like to introduce our contestants. Hailing from the vegan community, particularly the vegan activist community, we have semi-heavyweight contender weighing in at 10.8 thousand subscribers, channel à-bas-le-ciel, run by one Sir Eisel Mazard. And stepping up to challenge this somewhat young man, somewhat older man, we have, of course, us representing the initiative, weighing in at 151 super solid spotter subscribers. Soul Mechanics, run by Megan Lee, alias Super Sweetie Cheeks, and myself, Donovan Neal, alias Blue, alias Sir Dallas Tucker, alias Linus Infantile, alias Tanner Fenton, Nelson Tyler, Trent Delisario, just the list goes on and on and on, but most of you may go ahead and call me Sir as usual. In any case, I should like to note that this is not actually a direct challenge in the traditional sense, being that we had done a video in the High Noon series addressing à-bas-le-ciel, going after the character of one Madame Jacqueline Glenn as regards the use of psychotropics and other such natural remedies, particularly the use of SSRIs, was the actual topic of that video particularly. But being that we had sided or fallen on the side of natural remedies over SSRIs, but that Eisel was in disagreement to this, he then thereafter sent me, after some lengthy discussions about I don't remember what, he sent me directly via direct message a link to the particular video that we are addressing herein, which I went ahead and considered to be a personal challenge, being that it was a bit of a continuance off of the issue addressed in the prior video, and continued to express his determinations in that regard, his particular opinion of, generally speaking, natural remedies, but more particularly psychotropics, specific psychotropics, which we will speak to, or we have spoken to, in this video. However, as stated, it was not necessarily him addressing us directly, thereby I'm going to have to go ahead and state that we're going to have to regard this as being us challenging him in order to present it as an actual sort of rivalry in the High Noon series. And I should also like to note that in many respects it may be the case that we indeed did not fare so well, being that it would seem Eisel had managed to present this at just the appropriate time to catch me in the worst possible position and cause for me to react in a particularly negative manner. I do apologize in advance, sir. I'm not meaning to be, well, I probably am meaning to be an asshole. I am an asshole, sorry. So, you guys get to weigh it out on your own and decide who wins or who loses, but we're going to give a point to Eisel for me being a dick in response, and actually, I'm going to have to go ahead and at least hope that he had to some extent intended for this to happen, because it'd be a very well thought out move on his part. Otherwise, it's just happenstance either way. I do this kind of shit all the time, and I consider it a win whenever I do so. Again, we'll give him the point for that. In any case, without further ado, let us kick off this one of a few main events for the what will be the closing portions of what I'm thinking of as being kind of a first season to Soul Mechanics. Here we go.
Hey, welcome everybody. What are we calling this week? Welcome back
Well,
to...
this is a reality check, but it's a High Noon reality check installment for the High Noon series. And we are, in fact, as the title will have expressed, going up against our old friend à-bas-le-ciel head-to-head. So thank you very much, Eisel, for sending me that video via Instagram, although as I have informed you already, you made... Well, I informed you that you had made one mistake that I wanted to address. But thereafter watching the video, it turns out that you just continued to make mistakes, one after another, like horrendous mistakes that are so bad. like, I can't even address some of them because it would be damaging to you, and I'm not going to do that. But we'll do our best, at least, to hint at it, so maybe you know what you did wrong, and you can fix it later, I guess, for future reference.
We're gonna play it and go through and just say what we think.
Yeah, also, please make note that we are, in fact, not smoking, so you have no excuse to dismiss this and make some snide comment, joke about us being anything lesser than presenting intelligent information because, I don't know, we, use a substance of some sort or another that you disagree with. And I'm sure we should feel shame for that, yeah.
Shame, lots of shame.
We don't.
Right. Let us begin.
So you are proud of yourself.
Oh.
You're proud of yourself.
Oh, wait.
Just stop and reflect.
Oh, no, this is his
I don't
intro
think my father
rant.
should have been proud of himself for reading a 700-page novel. And it took 10 years to do it or something, okay?
Being
there's
that
no
you
pride in
skipped
that.
ahead and put this intro rant from later on, technically you will have addressed that Ulysses novel and your father on more than 2 occasions, at least, that we know of so far. Just keep that in mind, sir. Just very odd.
Alright. It just kind of comes right out the gate. I think I was ahead of a couple of seconds, but comes right out the gate with a picture of this young woman.
Who is gorgeous, by the way. My God, is she gorgeous.
Yeah, I don't know who it is. Apparently her name is Sarah, I guess.
Maybe I shouldn't say that. I think, well, she had to go to the Ayahuasca retreat. She can't be that young, but she looks awfully young.
Well, apparently she's a crackhead.
That's something to make note of.
Let's see what he's got to say about young Sarah.
Grown man reading a novel is not a big accomplishment, and James Joyce Ulysses is just another novel. I don't think that you, Sarah, should be proud of yourself for drug tourism. There's no pride in it. There is nothing here for you to be proud of, least of all vomiting and hallucinating on this particular drug, ayahuasca. I love this use of the word ceremony, too. I mean, you met up with your drug dealer, okay, and you got high. That's what happened. You can call it a ceremony, okay? You got high on hallucinogenic drugs. That's what you paid for.
Tisk, tisk.
If a crackhead refers to crack as medicine,
Oh, what a
how seriously?
great comparison.
If someone who huffs glue refers to the glue
And
as
huffing
medicine,
glue?
how
Geez,
seriously do
dude, like, you
If
were
an
already out of
alcoholic
bounds.
refers to
So, okay.
But huffing glue, that's not even on the fucking board, man.
So, taking part in ayahuasca, apparently one time, is comparable to being a full-on crackhead.
Yeah, I mean, well, firstly, it's gonna be, like, you, sir, actually go about not merely insinuating, but in fact declaring that this young lady is a crackhead, and apparently that she must be, like, out of shape or something to that effect. You stated that she's not, like, she is ill of sorts, I guess, wherein the fact of the matter is that she appears to be very healthy, happy, in excellent shape.
We'll get to that. That's
But
coming.
wait, the crack thing is
yeah.
that, you're gonna make this
comparison,
this
analogy.
connection between, or rather, I should say, to state it clearly, you are in fact creating or concocting an association between these two substances. That, I mean, that's going to be your first attempt at kind of cheating here, which isn't going to work. You can't cheat us, likely because, I mean, obviously, having gone entirely off the board with huffing glue, and then even further outside the door talking about your father reading a novel, that you don't know how to play this game, so we're going to have to teach you.
Dude, we drank coffee earlier.
We drank coffee.
We are basically crackheads.
Yeah.
We used a substance that affected our body.
I mean,
could be considered a drug.
I've been on prescription drugs for a while, man. Certain prescription drugs I've been using.
Oh, you're a crackhead, dude.
I'm not going to name them because I am kind of embarrassed as to why I need to be using them, but let me just say, I suffer from acute stupidity in many regards. However, as regards...
You know what, though? You should not feel embarrassed if
For being stupid?
if you use prescription medication
Okay, yeah.
to fucking function.
But for being stupid, I mean, generally speaking, at the very least I can say that you, Eisel, I think it would be healthy for you to feel pretty stupid, because to feel pretty ashamed of presenting yourself as in a as stupid context or what have you. Like, you've really. My problem here with this video overall, I should like to state, I did in fact inform him already via Instagram that you in fact do not get high off of this particular substance. In fact, it could be considered the opposite of a high, and in fact that is exactly what it actually is. It is the opposite of getting high.
Well, I think the distinction here is something that people use generally for recreational purposes, which would be people that are using crack and heroin and huffing glue and stuff like that. In this case, an ayahuasca ceremony, I said it, that's something that shamans have been using for hundreds of years, possibly longer, and I don't see the correlation, I guess. I'm kind of missing that. I don't get it. It's not like a recreational thing. People use it to try and deal with, like, mental shit or addiction or whatever.
Well, particularly to deal with psych issues, and I'll go ahead and play devil's advocate for a moment in stating that, in fact, I've known several people who have used illicit narcotics in a ceremonial fashion that do, in fact, affect upon themselves some measure of, meaningful, at the very least, kind of, I guess you could say, profound, or, measuring in some level of profundity, experiential, kind of adventures, so to speak, explorations. It's a measure by which to, in some way, explore the self, and ultimately, any drug or substance of any sort that you use is going to affect that particular sort of happenstance.
Well, I think there's a reason why it's called experimenting. I mean, you're experimenting.
Yes, and that's kind of stated.
With your own body.
That's stated in the term itself.
That's
so
not
it's obvious.
Hurting anybody. And if somebody ends up hurting themselves, like, that's kind of on them. And I think that of all people, he would agree,
Yeah, I mean, he seems to be a rational fellow, he has seemed to be a very rational, intelligent fellow up until this point. Now, as I was saying, I did in fact inform him that I didn't say it's the opposite of getting high, but I mean, really, you could go about accurately defining it as just that. It is intended, in fact, to take you deep into yourself. So it's down is where this goes.
Well, it also specifically works on your serotonin receptors.
Mm-hmm. It also, whilst DMT, the active, dimethyltryptamine, the functional component in this particular brew, is there are various ways in which it acts upon the brain for differing reasons, but it's probably most widely known for the fact that it is at least one of the primary active components in dreaming and in the process of dying.
Yeah, it's something that, you make in your brain.
Right, so I mean, if you want to talk about something that has profundity, that's going to be it, man.
That
like
didn't
that.
come up yet. You're getting too
I know, but
excited.
I mean, he gives us so many chances on that one. We can just keep taking them in advance, even. But I told him that it's not something that gets you high. In fact, it's quite a terrifying experience in most cases. It's very unlikely that you will ever get used to it, largely because, there's nothing to get used to. It's kind of like the most profoundly crazy and wild experience you'll ever have. It is so completely detached from anything you consider to be ordinary in any way.
I think it's important to kind of to narrow down our ideas here. The fact that it's considered to be a psychedelic, I think, has a little bit different of an implication as saying something is just purely hallucinogenic.
Right.
something that's psychedelic, I think there's a reason why there's two different words for that.
Yeah,
You know, like I think that's a little bit different. Yes, you could hallucinate on whatever,
Yeah, I
but
know
that's
it.
not really the point.
Well, I mean, on one hand, I did in fact want to say just that it is in fact kind of a misnomer to go about referring to it as being a hallucinogen, because it's kind of like not that.
Oh, well, yeah, it is.
I mean, it can be considered
Yes,
that,
it is
but
a drug and it is a hallucinogen. Let's be very clear and truthful.
Well,
here.
I'm about to be very clear in my statement here that, well, firstly, anybody who kind of brushes up on modern scientific endeavors will be quite well aware that one could easily go about describing everything you experience as being a hallucination. So, I mean, but that would be kind of a philosophical manner, and having watched 8 minutes of this video, I'm getting the idea that you don't really know much about philosophy, so we're not going to get into that. I'll just say that there is, in fact, a difference between what's termed a psychedelic and what's termed a hallucinogen, and then there are certain substances that I personally would find it to be, at the very least, you know, somewhat of a misnomer to be calling a hallucinogen, because from what I can tell, I've only had a few experiences with this particular substance myself, but it does in fact seem to be, I mean, really, when you're there, when you're experiencing the effects of this, it gives you every indication and in fact thoroughly convinces you that this experience is in some way or another more real than what you are experiencing here, which we know for a fact at the very least is somewhat unreal. So I mean, there's that. Of course, you wouldn't know that, being that you obviously never gave it a shot to find out what you are expressing such expertise about.
Which we don't know 100% sure
Oh, we
that
did.
he's never
His attitude proves
experimented,
it.
but that also, I think, gives a little bit of credibility to the, you know, speaking on personal experience. If you don't have one, then who are you to judge and shame other people for their personal experiences?
Right. I mean, I guess you could
Just
determine what you
generally.
think of it, like give an opinion on it to some extent.
Well,
but
giving an opinion and
passing
belittling and
judgments
demonizing,
and
yeah.
demonizing a substance, which, I mean, tricky, trying to associate it to a street illegal narcotic, that was a poor move. I informed him on Instagram that when he said the thing about, you know, making fun of people somebody who says they found the meaning of life in a 16-bit video game.
Okay, we didn't get to that. Let's watch the video and then we'll refer to
fine.
it. Yes, okay, just shush it.
Seriously, do you take it? Guess what, guys? You can hallucinate if you just drink enough vodka. You can hallucinate if you just smoke enough hashish. It doesn't mean they're medicine.
Hashish. People who refer to any THC substance as hashish, I find that funny.
Like a 7th grader in the 60s.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that he would go about calling just ordinary weed, or even like maybe even
1960,
CBD gummies hashish.
Hashish.
I mean, it's just it's like a kind of
It's an old fashioned.
it's like a nomenclature that is commonly presented by people who have just never tried it and don't know anything about it, and just kind of you know, demonized it by default because somebody told them to.
Coming from the whole reefer madness type
Which,
of
I mean, it's weird that you would do that because you're supposed to be a vegan, right? So, I mean, you'd have pretty good reason to be backing these things. Like, you want to be on the side of these things.
You mean like nature and that, you know, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so, I mean, it's like...
I guess, I mean...
But then again, I already went about explaining to him how, in being a vegan activist, he is in fact presenting himself as not an atheist, yet he goes about making statements that proclaim that area in this again. So obviously it's difficult for this guy to learn his lessons, and I want to say, I'm sorry if I come across crass here. It's just that ultimately you can say whatever you want, give your opinions, you can judge, you can even go about fucking belittling this girl in so many ways, and maybe I'll refrain, but the fact of the matter is that throughout the course of this video, you're effectively kind of putting yourself down, making fun of yourself ultimately, And that kind of pisses me off because, like, we do have a high respect for you. We've seen a lot of potential. You've presented a lot of great shit in other videos. But then where you get on this particular topic, it's like you're almost trying to insult your own person. And like, I can't fix it. Like, I could sit here and try to fix the mistakes you've made and never succeed. You've done that much damage to your own personal integrity. So, I mean, lesson one, if you want to play the game correctly, perhaps being vegan, maybe support natural substances, because that would be the prudent thing to do.
Because somebody's vegan doesn't mean they have to.
Well, at the very least, do not
Support
make
any
an
kind of
attempt at
substances.
demonizing them, because that's
Well,
defeating the purpose of your own endeavor.
No matter what it is, judging and demonizing things that you, just because you don't find them personally moral, is a kind of an immature stance to take, just generally.
I know.
In any subject,
right?
you know,
I mean, and you generally present yourself as being very worldly, very matured. In fact, that's kind of what I looked up to you for, is how you've been so well traveled and so deeply involved in so many traditions. Yet it seems like, I don't know, maybe you just went and studied up with these traditions for the sake of, I guess, pretending like you have some insight into them, and then kind of trashing them, you know, very inadequately.
Let's continue.
Unbelievable misery their whole lives long. And they're looking for something. They're looking for something to make them feel better. They're looking for something to give their life a sense of meaning, direction, purpose, optimism.
Assholes.
I can relate. I also have a human heart. You know,
Okay, well, I mean, you're making it kind of difficult to believe that, honestly, but let's address that little sentiment there. Firstly, I'm not really seeing anything to indicate that this girl is kind of in dire straits. Like, what makes you think she's so desperate?
Well, he might have more information. I don't know
Well, yeah,
anything about this girl or
never
whatever.
mind, I
but
retract that, because it seems like later on in the video you present some values that kind of indicate there may be some sort of personal connection here, at least on your end. But she doesn't look, she looks like she's fairly happy. She looks in good spirits, in good health.
To use the word miserable when that particular picture is on screen seems a little bit
almost seems as though, like, I mean,
contradictory.
firstly, it seems like you must not have had any pictures that would represent that, because you would have shown that.
Yes.
Unless you're just not even trying here. But, I mean, you
Well,
are
I mean,
trying, because...
It definitely looks like, you know, she's a homeless, toothless, dirty, garbage-eating crackhead who's ruined her whole life. I mean, geez, like, she looks like a model.
I mean, don't mock it entirely. I mean,
That's
we can go through the, jump through the atheist circuit hoops in suggesting that her mouth is closed, she's not showing her teeth, therefore she doesn't have any. Now, obviously you must not have had a better representative pick available, or just not cared to try, but I mean, it almost seems as though perhaps you're kind of yet again so very quickly thereafter making another attempt at kind of tricking your audience into making an association between her and just generally bad negativity things, like whatever you can muster up that comes across as being, you know, villainous in some way or another, or at the very least to be you know, to be looked down upon. Like, you're just generally trying to convince people to dislike this girl. And I mean, given the way that you treat her going forward into the video, it makes sense you'd want to prep them that way. Although, obviously, if any of them decide to watch this video, you might be in a little bit of trouble there.
Let's continue.
But the message here is, if you're looking for something, make sure it's something that doesn't cause brain damage.
Oh, God. Okay,
Make sure
stop it
it's
again.
something that isn't built.
Firstly, I forgot about you said you can relate.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any relation.
Right, it's important that you said that, and I'm not sure if we'll actually need to make use of it, but it might come up later, so bear that in mind, people watching. He said that he can relate to her feeling helpless and hopeless and needing some way, some measure of escape or what have you, something that cure her ills, I guess. Needing to turn to something.
Or maybe just wanting to experiment and
Yeah, could be. I mean, it could be just
dive into her own psychology and try to
Right.
figure stuff out. What a piece of shit.
it could be
Like,
just the intrinsic adventurous instinct of the human entity, which I'm gathering you might not be so acquainted with. It's like almost seems like maybe à-bas-le-ciel doesn't actually know so much what it's like to be a person. Very odd, but
well,
I'm
at least
I'm
not
doubting,
since-
I'm kind of doubting that you can relate, because if you could relate to a situation of that sort, chances are you wouldn't be like kind of bullying it and making fun of it like a fucking child, would you?
Probably not.
And it'd likely be the opposite of what you do if you can relate to that, particularly given the actual set of ills this girl seems to actually suffer from, in what case I personally can relate directly, and I can say that there's no fucking way you'd like, we'll get to it. But
The brain damage thing.
the brain
Let's touch on
damage
that.
thing
There's
is
actually no there's not a lot of studies about ayahuasca, but there is a few where they've done brain scans on people that are in the midst of the effects of ayahuasca and or DMT or whatever. And there's actually, I don't think it causes brain damage. I've never
no, it doesn't cause
never
brain damage.
seen or
and
read that anywhere.
let's not allow for any room for interpretation to be provided here. It most certainly does not cause brain damage, and the first indication of that would be the fact that it is produced by the brain and used regularly. So, like, no, it very likely couldn't possibly cause brain damage, provided it is produced by the brain for the purposes of aiding the brain. Now, alcohol, drinking too much of that, and hallucinating, shit, drinking enough booze to hallucinate, get fucking real. You die from that, I think.
Yeah, alcohol will fuck with your brain for sure.
What was the other one he used? He said could make you hallucinate. Smoking
Aspirin.
hashish. Maybe, probably if you like. I mean, I guess the first time I ever tried weed when I was a kid, I don't really use any of that stuff anymore. I haven't even dabbled in the psychedelics in a long time. But when I was a kid, I used to smoke weed a lot. And well, I was a young teenager, maybe 13, and I did kind of like hallucinate in a way more profound than any psychedelics I've ever used. It was a pretty wild experience, so I guess that can happen ordinarily, and I'm going to go ahead and doubt it had caused brain damage, because I mean, it was like...
most of the studies about marijuana have to do with developing brains, so as you said, younger people and people in their teens and early 20s, there, I think, have been some studies that shown that there are effects, but not particularly like damage. Like, you are still like a functioning human being if you smoke weed when you're 16.
Yeah, you know what? Let's go ahead though and just we'll give them a point on that one, because I mean, I guess technically you could say that if it's altering the mechanisms of the developing brain, you could say that is damaging. However, of course, that is actually not the case, because whatever you happen to do throughout the course of your brain developing is in fact what defines it as being developed. So I mean, that's natural. Even if it is crack or vodka, it's a natural process that goes into the act of developing the brain.
Well, it's not a natural process. It's something you're putting into your body.
Which is what you do naturally.
I guess.
I mean, you use things, all kinds of things all the time. You
well,
eat
like
food.
I said, we drank some coffee. We're basically crackheads. All right, let's continue.
I mean, I'd say we're worse than crackheads.
So, all the brain damage done by ayahuasca. Lots of studies on that.
No.
It's on lies. It doesn't require you to lie to others. Because when you end up lying about these things, man, that's a real red flag. That's a real sign.
Dude, she's
When you got
gorgeous.
people coming on the internet claiming they're sober, lying to themselves and lying to others about their sobriety, The fact that you're lying about it.
All right, I
is
just want to
almost
say
as
right here,
powerful
I
an
don't know,
indicator as the
we haven't watched the video all the way through yet, and I don't think we're going to in this run, so I can't say for certain whether maybe he pulls out of his ass later on that she's, like, addicted to some kind of drug and that's become public knowledge, but for all intents and purposes, it seems as though you're saying that she's lying about being sober by saying that she's used this substance, which again is not technically to be considered a drug, at the very least, not a narcotic, does not get you high, is not used for recreational purposes, and is in fact used, has been widely used for God only knows how long, to not treat but cure psyche-related abnormalities, or you know, what could be termed
Problems,
psychiatric anomalies of some sort or another. It actually fixes them, and there's a reason it does that, which, you know, would be sincerely abundant with profundity should you look into it, because I mean, that's interesting shit. I'm not going to tell you why. I'm going to hope that you actually care enough to, you know, look into the shit that you've been criticizing, but there is a very cool reason as to why that is in fact the case.
The fact that you're giving yourself brain damage for it. And then point 3,
I mean, I guess the point being that she's not lying is what I'm saying. Like, how, in what way do you see her as lying here?
Whatever. I mean, hell, even if she was lying, I think the bigger signpost is that he's just so honorable. So again,
right. I mean, I guess if you're like
to kind of stomp on somebody else because they don't use your same definition of sobriety. I know a chick that quit drinking, but occasionally uses like edibles or whatever, and people freak out about like her using the word. She had to stop saying the word sober. It's semantics, basically. She considers that to be her sobriety. That's her sobriety.
No, she
That's
uses
not
like
your sobriety.
THC edibles?
Yeah. That's it.
Yeah, okay. Well, I mean,
but
generally speaking, I guess sobriety, it's relatable in the context that it's used for
whatever
like whatever substance you happen to be using.
Yes.
Like maybe intoxication or lack of intoxication.
No, specifically was
I'd like to think sobriety would refer to your lucidity, right?
Specifically, the sobriety in this person that I'm referring to was related to the damage done in her everyday life. So her drinking, I guess, was a problem, and then she stopped doing that, and occasionally will eat a gummy or whatever, and that really upset a lot of people because they define what sobriety is. But really, in her experience, that's not affecting her life to the extent of doing all of the damage that the drinking was doing. So, whatever the fucking case, it's her life and her personal experience. She can use whatever the hell word she wants.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, I guess we could make a point in the statement that it is, in fact, to be regarded none of your fucking business, at the very least not your place to go about declaring her a liar for, you know, using a word in a way that you don't consider it to be perfectly feasible. But, I mean, as regards the gummy thing, to state for anybody that's watching this that may be involved in anything like that or have any opinions on that matter, I'd like to point out that alcohol is going to be one of the most addictive, damaging, and dangerous substances to have ever been presented on this planet. And it's just downright the worst in every possible way.
Heroin's having a pretty good day right now, though.
I'm pretty sure that this young lady, whomever Cheeks happens to be speaking of, could probably have avoided, you know, going through all the pains and distresses and indeed permanent damages, you know, from becoming alcoholic, were she to have been allotted the decision to just kind of use some relatively safe gummies every now and then in the first place. But that's not an option she's given because, well, I mean, alcohol's perfectly cool, but gummies, no fucking way. That shit's illegal as fuck.
The laws are fucked up, and they are changing, in the midst of changing right now as we speak. There's states that have gone green, I guess, as you would call it. I think is a funny analogy, but either way, it's one person's personal experience and them using a word for themselves that, again, it doesn't make them a shitty person.
Right.
You know what I mean?
I mean,
like,
I guess I could say from my personal experience, I was alcoholic for a long time.
Yeah, kind of. I mean,
like,
you were drinking a lot
bad,
years ago, yeah.
I mean, I was doing it for a specific purpose. I was in a lot of pain.
The purpose doesn't really
so
factor into
yeah,
the
it
damage that
it's
was
not
done.
necessarily going to be regarded as a good thing. Certainly not. But I mean, I could say it seemed necessary at the time, but that's just what I'm intending to say here. We, at least here, I'm not sure where Eisel is at the moment or where he's living. He's been all over the damn place apparently, but
Put your head up.
here in America, it's not simply the factor that, alcohol, again, just the worst thing you could have, is not only readily available, but it is in fact encouraged as the outlet for escaping your ills here.
Or just recreation, yeah.
I mean, you're pretty much, you'd be goddamn lucky to get through even a decade without running into it at some point or another.
Right.
Like, to get through a whole life, fuck me, impossible. Like,
And I can assume that he probably agrees with the thought that alcohol being so readily and prevalent and readily available
right, I know,
is
well, I'm not really...
probably a bad thing.
I'm
you
not
know?
really talking to him. I'm talking to anybody who might agree with the
I
idea
think
that there's something wrong with using gummies to get off of booze. No, you use that whatever you need to get off of booze.
not used to get off of booze.
I'm just, if were that to be the case, then just as an example,
Right.
I used Mitradina speciosa to effectively get myself off of booze permanently and cure myself of that terrible addiction. And it's short of heroin.
But I also...
If there's something you can use to do that and you feel the need to, then get fucking to it, dude. That's a bad fucking thing to have in your life,
I think...
is alcoholism.
I think that it's based on somebody's personal decision and their experience. But I also want to note that I've never heard you use the word sobriety or sober in regards to just specifically alcohol. So I guess some people do and some people don't. It's just a fucking word.
No, I mean, I guess that I kind of feel like I'm sober, although I don't really. It's like when I was drinking, it was seriously, it was at the point wherein I was drinking, shitty from withdrawals of it. Like, I did not actually get drunk so much at the time, although now I drink every now and then, at like celebrations or whatnot, and I notice a difference. I feel like a fucking moron, and I just want to go straight to sleep.
Because that's what it does to people.
Fucking useless substance that is just so easily mistaken for a cure for something or another that will save your ass at the moment and then fuck you over for the remainder. Just as I said, please do, anybody
But
who's
again,
get the fuck rid of that.
While we're on the subject of just alcohol in general, I think it's interesting to point out that there are plenty of people, probably millions of people, that recreationally and occasionally will drink a beer or a glass of wine and maybe, I don't know, toast, which could be considered a ceremony or ritual, and it's not causing their lives to be forever endangered and tampered and damaged, and that doesn't make you better than them.
Right, so I guess I changed my mind. Alcohol is perfectly cool. It's just remain, as far away from ayahuasca as you can. Mind you, it should be noted for anybody that's not hip to these things, these ceremonies, which are in effect perfectly valid, entirely, what's the word,
Ritual.
staged and performed for the most part, ritual ceremonies have been practiced. Again, we don't know how long, but for a long time since jungle peoples figured out how to create this substance from mixing two entirely unrelated plants together, which is, by the way, fucking impossible. It's like there's no way that they could have come up with that unless, of course, they are telling the truth when they say that nature itself had guided them to doing this, and in fact presented them with something that does allow for them to commune with, they commune with something, I'll tell you this. Either A, they're communing with spirit, obviously, because, if you know what spirit actually means, then you'd be understanding of the factor that when you hallucinate, you are communing with your spiritual entity, or at the very least aspects of your psychological entity, which
Is why it's
are
called
real.
psychedelic.
They're real. Just because there are a lot of people who don't want to fess up to the fact that they don't understand them or how they operate, it doesn't mean they're not real. They exist, you experience this, so it's happening in some sense. Or B, they could be aliens, because some of the experiences that we have, and I mean real aliens, I'm not talking about like
there is
space
a
aliens from
phenomenon.
another planet, I'm saying you run into creatures in these states that are something else, like they are entirely alien to even, like, there's no way you could have made this up to be imagining it. It is something entirely alien to your very sense of comprehension.
There is an interesting phenomenon where people who have done ayahuasca and DMT have had there's like a pattern of experiences, which I think it's funny, over the course of many different people who don't know each other, obviously, and sometimes the same thing will pop up in a bunch of different hallucinations.
That's very
between
much worth noting.
People who are unrelated. I think one of them is like the some kind of like goddess,
the aliens,
character.
the
There's
shaman
another,
character, which I believe is, I can say, there's the lady, the goddess character is what they call
and
the lady.
Little creatures.
The little creatures,
It's
the
just a weird
aliens,
phenomenon.
and then the shaman, I believe, is actually, in my experience, seems to be a representation of a primary archetype, of your whatever primary archetype that you identify with personally. Mine was the trickster. But it should be it's very much worth noting, and she's being kind of like a very custodious about her, is that the right word?
I don't know, I'm just saying, it's an
she's
interesting phenomenon.
She's being very giving, I suppose you could say, with this one, but no, it is in fact like highly made note of. It's widely known that in fact many, if not mostly, almost all of the experiences that people have line up almost precisely, with alterations just so much to the extent as, something as little as their interpretation of it, or perhaps like color schematics, just very little differences, but for the most part, everybody does wind up in this same other world that is entirely separate from this one, and do in fact engage with these same otherworldly creatures. And this doesn't really even happen here, man. So it's like, it's a fucking stretch and a half to be calling it a hallucination.
Okay, but it could be.
It could be, but
So,
our evidence attests
again,
to the contrary.
Again, let's be absolutely clear and truthful while we're talking about this, that it's an interesting phenomenon, but that doesn't mean that we 100% know for sure that that's what's happening. It could very well be hallucinations, which, by the way, doesn't make it any less meaningful to a person who's experiencing these things.
Okay, well, two things to say to that. One, it's very, very much the case that we do have this pattern existing in most of these trips, as you're calling them. So, should you be a person that is acting of a skeptical orientation, chances are you would lean toward considering this evidence of some measure of reality inherent here, because again, it's going to be a very rare thing to find many people having precisely the same experiences. That says something. At the very least, it's enough to make somebody think maybe there's more to see here.
Well, just the very basic concept that, like you said, if it's about reality, then somebody who has studied, philosophy and psychology and those kinds of things, if you experience it, then that is real for you.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're to the point where we're not only belittling and shaming and judging people, but also deciding for them what they experience as being profound or meaningful.
And that says a lot, man, but we can pick that up where you go ahead and use, a ridiculous word in relation to this lady that points out even more to that effect. But the second thing I'd like to say is that personally, I will go ahead and say with certainty it's one of the two things I suggested. I mean, sure, if you're interacting with pieces of your identity, you want to call that hallucination, okay, I guess, but I mean, that's what you're doing all the time. So I mean, it's not like, and insofar as regards the studying aspect, he claims to have been deeply into philosophies, though that's made kind of suspect here in this video. But no, I doubt he's studied up into psychology, because he wouldn't have made this video.
Well, either way, philosophy is kind of, you're going to step into some puddles of, studying that, of what's real.
Yeah, none of them are to be regarded, wrong or shameful.
Exactly. So to say that what's real for you must be what's real for everyone else, it seems.
It's a very heavy indication of a
Yes.
particular difficulty in your psyche. So.
Absolutely. Actually, need a moment here, people. We're back. All right. Sorry for the interruption.
Hi, à-bas-le-ciel, I'm your biggest fan.
Let us continue.
Philosophical profundity about these things in your life. Even if we weren't talking about a hallucinogenic drug, whether you're talking about a religion or a book, be it fiction or nonfiction, dude, if you meet someone who says that they found the meaning of life in Star Wars or Lord of the Rings or in a video game, like, have you ever had one of those conversations where someone tries to tell you that they found the meaning of life playing a 16-bit video game, and you're like, dude, I don't care what the fuck you're about to tell me next. Whatever was in that video game, it's not that meaningful. It's not that profound. Can we have a moment of recognition?
Okay, that's the mistake that made this video happen. And my God, was it a good one.
Let's just recap what we just heard right now. Movies, books, video games. Was there anything else? That was pretty much it?
I think that's enough.
Your environment, essentially. Things that you see that are art, that are created by creative people who were inspired to make such art, cannot be profound?
He didn't say they cannot be, he just said that they aren't, by standard of his judgment on the matter, which is effectively
decide.
It's really a non-judgment, because I mean it's abstract in the sense that you're just vaguely addressing anybody that happens to pop up in your hallucination here. But I mean, firstly, the video game thing, I need to get that done first. Okay, so I found the meaning of life in a 16-bit video game on several occasions, and you know what the best part about that is? That not only did it continue to become more profound each time that it happened, but it also continued to never serve me wrong. You, sir, having the training and the background that you do, should indeed be capable of finding that very same meaning of life in just about any fucking thing that you look at. Most especially something that is specifically designed to convey just that. And for you to go about saying not only that it doesn't because you say so, but that it's fucking stupid and that you should dismiss anybody who suggests as much, I mean, it really speaks volumes to the level of idiocy that you are apparently intending to present. I mean, I really don't think you're that stupid that this would be a mistake. But man, did you fuck up there. Like, that was probably the dumbest thing I've ever fucking heard on YouTube. Are you serious right now? And you claim to be involved in some way with philosophical matters. That's, now, see, now you're lying You gotta be. You have to be lying.
No,
It's
no,
impossible.
No, he's most honorable.
Oh, right. I forgot that you're the
Other
one
people are
one
liars.
person that's better than everybody else, or at least to some extent smarter than everybody else.
Yeah,
I guess
other people are liars. He's most honorable.
there can only be one person that's better and smarter than everyone else. So bear that in mind going forward. But I mean, as it stands, what you've presented here is just like fraudulence. It's got it. I'm not going to believe that you're that backward. I think very highly of you, man. Your other works, have developed a great degree of respect for you. But what you said there was beyond the point of what should be considered sheer outright absurdity. And I mean,
I do find it hard to believe
it
that,
is. It's very.
that there would be not any occasion where you could find some kind of profound meaning for yourself and your personal experience in
Right.
any type of art in your environment.
I mean, not to mention the fucking face value, point blank, simple implications attached therein, suggesting that I guess maybe you've never found meaning in any artworks, like books, movies.
I
like,
find that
because
very hard to believe.
I'm gonna go ahead and wonder where exactly you did find any of these deeply profound and all-knowing, much more smarter than all other people's.
Oh, 730-page
reasonings.
book called Ulysses.
Yeah, right. I
Which,
mean,
by the
but
way, is a book.
it's just a
It's
book.
art.
It's just a book, and your father never read it, so I mean, you can get over that. But
It's crazy. I mean, it's art. It's inspired people creating things with symbolism.
I know, and it's pretty
and
much
imagery, and to be able to be blind.
It's not
to
only
that.
it's not only a very feasible method of, you know, concocting and delivering whatever values one has to present as regards, at the very least, their personal sense of meaning in life, but I mean, it's the only way. Like, that's why we made art, is because it is how we go about doing that. And I'm going to venture to guess that likely you came to much of the understanding that you indeed possess at this point from having studied, right? I mean, in fact, you even go so far as to teach other people through your writings in many cases. So, I mean, I guess what? Are you saying that your writings are totally fucking worthless, and that if I suggested I had garnered any meaning from them, I should be considered a dumbass and dismissed outright? I mean, let's speak to some of the other implications just very quickly. Let's talk about the people who are watching this shit and buying it. Like, what's your problem, man? Why would you say something like that to people who have been, you know, invested fans of yours for however long? Obviously knowing full well that they're probably just ignoring you anyway, because, I mean, if you think you can get away with that, shit, not on my watch. But I guess there's going to be a whole hell of a lot of people that are just going to hear you say that. And, I mean, perhaps they'll blow it off and be like, I don't know, maybe it was just a mistake or one random dumb thing he said. But I think there's probably going to be a lot more of them who might even go ahead and convince themselves that you're right. Which, I don't know, in my world, that kind of translates into having damaged a developing person. Like, that's not cool, man. That's not only wrong and ridiculously so, but it's not fucking cool. It's not acceptable. Tisk tisk, no, not on my watch, and don't ever bring up fucking 16-bit video games again. That was the most masterful form of artwork that's ever been composed. And yes, it contains the meaning of life in various places. It's just, you really gotta be sort of capable of dealing with the information that's given to you.
Or just looking deeper into something that you're utilizing for, you know, any sort of entertainment.
Right. I mean,
you know, somebody made that. I can't get over it. It's art.
Yeah, I'll calm down. I'm not going to be so critical here.
The purpose of it is to be meaningful and beautiful.
Right. I'll say that if you have eyes that see, and you're capable of reading into values to any measure, even at the surface level, you will be capable of seeing at least a good hefty chunk of the meaning involved in your life, at least. in every fucking thing that you come across. And if it is something that is particularly designed for that purpose, then I guess I should say you had better be able to see it. Or you really have no place making fucking YouTube videos talking about the profundity of natural substances literally designed by creation itself for just the purpose of providing insight into personal meaning and experience. It's just, it's not, it's like, I don't understand. Are you joking, or
No.
have you actually managed to convince yourself that you're in some way correct here?
I mean,
Or that you have any reason to be saying this at all?
It's likely just kind of like a momentary,
Lapse.
kind of arrogant type of, like,
Oh yeah, okay.
thing,
Well,
you know
it
what I
could be
mean?
that, and that, I
I
mean,
find
that's
it
sort of
very-
indicated at another point.
I find it hard to believe that somebody couldn't see meaning in that type of stuff, no matter, maybe not every
I mean,
single
at the very least,
game
that
or
somebody
book or
should
whatever.
be so mocking of the very idea of it. It's
Yeah.
just, it's.
It's weird.
I mean, we could say it's pompous, but that doesn't cover the fact that it's just entirely uncalled for. It doesn't make any reasonable sense whatsoever, and it's like, I feel like offended that you would do that to your own, like, you made yourself look so fucking stupid here, man. It's disappointing. I'm sorry. I'm not saying that you're stupid or that your channel doesn't have value. Lord knows it's packed with it. It's just, I'm wondering now if you know that it is, because apparently you can't see it. But I mean, I don't like when, I mean, you're a target asset, dude. We are going to be working with you at some point in the future. Apparently, perhaps even to help pick you back up after you fucking bomb at some point. Because, I mean, what are you doing here? Do you have a reason to be doing this? Other than, like, attacking this idea because you got kind of kicked around the last time you tried and now you're angry about it, I guess?
The reason obviously wouldn't be any kind of creative art.
It couldn't be, because, I mean, what would be the fucking point
Right,
in that?
exactly.
It's just, it's not even allowed to try to get that out of it.
Yeah,
Like
I don't
fucking
know, man.
stupid person reading books for knowledge. Idiot.
It's very weird.
It's very
That
weird.
one kind of caught me by surprise a little bit, I have to say.
Yeah, again, I'm sorry. I don't mean to be, like, overtly critical. I certainly don't want to come across offensive, man. It's just that I don't like it when my mom does something unconsciously making fun of herself, and I do in fact kind of give her somewhat of a reprimand in that regard, saying, hey, don't make fun of my mother, that's not allowed. Now I'm gonna say, don't make fun of my assets, don't make fun of my people, most especially when you're making fun of yourself and you don't even know that you're doing it. It's like there's a wealth of damaging inference in that. It's not a good look, man.
Well, let's continue.
Embarrassing me.
Recognition that any supposedly profound truth you are going to claim to have discovered through the use of hallucinogenic drugs,
Crazy.
it is going to be on the same level as a glue huffer
Yeah.
telling you about
No.
the profundity he discovered through huffing glue.
And stop using the word
Or
profundity.
someone
You
who
don't know what it
suffered a
means.
concussion in a car accident telling you about a profound realization they had in moments of delirious dementia, of hallucinating because they had a concussion in a car accident.
Right, that'd be
Stop
close.
lying to yourself.
Somewhat akin.
So, no, I still don't see the comparison.
Yeah, there's not really any.
I would make more sense to talk about stuff like LSD and, other psychedelics
At least that
that, by the way, are used to treat PTSD.
would. Yeah, that's what they were
and-
invented for.
Right, and what's the ecstasy one? Is that technically MDMA or something?
MDMA was the origin for it, I think.
Didn't that end up being, it was, decades ago probably, but didn't that end up being pretty successful in, like, helping people, marriage counselors would give it to people, and, like,
I don't know
stuff
about
like that. I
marriage
think I
counselors
heard that once.
specifically, but it is in fact being used in trials right now to cure depression and PTSD. And
Absolutely.
there's a reason for that. I mean, it might just very well be as simple as kind of admitting that the people who made it for that purpose might have been on to something, instead of,
Well-
stigmatizing and illegalizing this substance because it doesn't fit the format of what propaganda we'd like to be spreading at the time.
I mean,
But then I guess maybe if you don't read any meaning into it, it's easier to go ahead and ignore
yeah, absolutely.
everything that matters.
There's no meaning in any experiences. It's so weird to just narrow down a field like that.
Right.
To say that, there's this group of situations and things that people can find meaning from in this category, but in this category, concussions and ayahuasca, there's absolutely no way that anybody could have a meaningful experience.
Right.
It's
so-
probably not likely that a
Right.
person in a car crash with a concussion is going to have some kind of
No, well, actually,
meaningful
that one-
experience, but
That
What if-
one
what if
actually
somebody
kind
did?
of, that's a legitimate comparison to make to some extent, considering, just to explain for you, because it's pretty
no,
clear.
that's the comparison to the brain damage.
Yes,
Ayahuasca
I know,
works
no,
on serotonin.
I'm saying to explain to you what DMT is doing, or at least what it's theorized to be doing, ayahuasca as it were, but the active dimethyltryptamine component. Effectively, the hypothetical discernment here is going to have to be, well, if the brain is utilizing this chemical for the purpose of producing dream states, and then to some effect during the process of death, of course we have no way of talking to those people to ascertain precisely what had happened, but we'd have to go ahead and go out on a limb and suggest that perhaps it's going to be similar to what we experience when we use it somewhat recreationally, I suppose you could say. There's nothing wrong with that, so it's okay to go ahead and state that just about everything is recreational, isn't it? But the hypothesis would have to be that, being that to be the case, as how the brain is making use of it regularly, ordinarily, then it could very well be the case that when we introduce the triggering mechanism for this component out of the natural processing status, or out of that context rather, it's sort of mimicking essentially the state of perhaps dying, perhaps kind of creating a, you could say, sort of a synthetic NDE, in a near-death experience, in what you do in fact sort of trick the brain into unlocking the doorway into whatever does lie beyond death. Of course, though, and to to connect with what he had said about the whole not being meaning in anything and all that, is that you're still, I mean, we couldn't say that it's going to be presenting a synthetic near-death experience and expect for that to mean anything to you, because apparently you're still thinking of yourself as being an atheist, even though we explained this to you in the last video we did addressing you, that you are in fact not an atheist. In fact, you can't be.
But that doesn't have anything to do with what we're talking about.
Well, it kind of does,
a
because
near-death experience isn't necessarily a proof of God.
no,
It's an experience.
right,
It
but
could
I
be
mean,
anything.
that's the point, is that what it explains is that chances are he's just naysaying anything that comes across as being in any way
Related to
a spiritual
yeah.
sort of experience, because he still
Sure.
thinks he's an atheist, and thereby thinks that he has to follow the atheist rule set of ignoring anything that conflicts with your not a chance of spirituality attitude, which again you shouldn't have, because you're not an atheist, and I mean, it's not serving you, it's not working, this doesn't work, okay, you're ruining your channel.
All right, calm down.
Sorry,
All right, let's
I apologize.
let's continue. What the fuck is this? What the hell is this?
What are you doing?
I don't know. Something
To
just popped
stop
up.
lying to others
Here we go.
about the profoundity of these things. Guys, I'm going to throw in like a really quick example
Oh, wait,
of something
that.
that's in no way
That.
related to drugs.
Okay, they can't see that. There is an image here of this
There's
girl.
3 images.
There's 3 images, 2 of which are like, I don't know, they're just kind of sexy swimsuit images, one of which she's making a muscle, maybe she like exercise, does like weightlifting or something, I don't know. But the third image, the first one from our site, is going to be this picture of the girl, you know, just ordinary face, nothing special or strange about it, except for the fact that it says Crackhead Logic, which I guess is the thumbnail for another one of your videos. In what case I have to kind of make a notation here, something to the effect of, what the fuck is your problem, dude? Like, that's not cool at all. You're gonna fucking, I mean, you've said nothing to indicate that this girl has done anything wrong in any way whatsoever.
Or has any kind of relation to crack.
And certainly doesn't have any relation to any illegal narcotics, let alone crack cocaine. Yet you're just gonna go out and call her, like, it's very indicative that obviously you must have some kind of a personal problem with her. As I said, at least on your end, I don't know if you know her personally.
Yeah, there's
but
plenty of other people that do ayahuasca that you can find pictures of. I mean,
Right.
it seems a little
But I
personal.
guess you might know her personally,
Yeah,
in what
I mean,
case it
whatever.
becomes stranger. And trust me, yes, we will have our operator investigate this, so it doesn't really matter. We'll know everything there is to know about it in a couple days. But as it stands, I don't know a fucking thing about why you seemingly have such a problem, if not just outright despise this apparently very young lady, which again is going to speak to the issue regarded in the other video we did about you. I'm not going to pick it up here, say anything about it. I don't want to be too damaging to you, but sir, you need to watch your step. I mean, you are in dangerous territory. You don't want to step too far out on the ice, or I'm just going to ensure that it cracks. Do not fucking post pictures calling some innocent girl a fucking crackhead online. Like, what the fuck is... It's so humiliating that you should be doing this, man.
It's
It's
a
like,
little juvenile.
just, it's very simple. Don't do shit like that.
It's a little juvenile.
That's the sort of actual negative, you know, objective sort of wrongness we all need to be working together against. Not being fucking just disreputable assholes all over the place for the fucking sake of it. Like, is that clickbait? Are
Well,
your fans attracted to that?
It's justifiable because she is a liar, I think. We've gone over
Yeah,
this. And
she's a
also amoral. She is a amoral liar.
He said amoral?
No,
Did
but
you say amoral?
he didn't say amoral, but I
Okay.
think immoral and morality and honorability are kind of underlying in the things that we're talking about here.
I think it's like maybe he thought, I don't know what you were thinking, man, but I mean, why do I have to feel as though I need to speak down to you like a child being reprimanded? This is poor form. It's not, again, it's unacceptable, not on my watch. Please don't do that again. Don't ever fucking do that again, dude. I will crush your fucking channel
Alright.
like a tin can, I swear to
Calm
God.
down, Jesus Christ.
Well, he's a representative. Don't be a piece of shit, man. How simple.
You can't control other people.
Oh, I can. This.
My
Anal
father
sex?
lied about reading the novel Ulysses.
Yeah,
Oh, it makes
this is what
sense
I'm talking
now.
about. This is what I'm talking about. The lying.
Yeah, it
thing
makes
comes
sense
up.
now.
Yes, the honorability and general morality seems to be an underlying issue that he has with apparently many people.
And we can see why.
And I don't know. Now he's talking about his dad.
His father. I mean, in what context does his father having lied about reading a book come
Have
into play
anything
in
to
this
do-
video, except in the case
Right.
that it might be the inspiration for the feelings that he's projecting onto this fucking poor young lady who's probably got nothing, doesn't even know about you.
Well, it's comparable
It's
somehow.
not. It's not in any way comparable. But I mean,
Somehow.
it does bring up a few indications, particularly kind of glaring values that come into play in that regard. One of which being that apparently it really got on your nerves, like it hit a nerve, hit an ongoing, a lasting, damaging nerve in you. That your father should just like kind of lie about something stupid that doesn't really matter at all,
No,
and that's strange.
That's not it. That's just general.
I mean, maybe it did.
it's
I mean,
general
it could-
daddy issues, dude.
obviously,
whatever.
it could matter to you personally in a big, big way were you to be reading some kind of meaning in it, sure. But it is just a book, which, I mean, you've attested couldn't possibly hold any real meaning, and for your father to have lied about reading it, obviously he didn't get a chance to read any. I mean, there's no point in this other than to indicate that there's something stuck in your head playing over and over again regarding your father, this book, and then you thereby projecting feelings towards this particular circumstance upon anybody you somehow come up with the idea is in some way related to that.
Yeah, the relation is the general dishonorableness
Right.
of people that, he's dubbed.
It kind of seems you're making a mistake here. Like, this is an error in judgment. You are effectively glitching out in going so far as to call this young lady a liar.
It's a bit of a derail, the dad things, but let's see what
Yeah, that doesn't play.
Damn near 10 years. All right, I didn't count the number of years, but like, he was lying about this before I started high school and all the way through to my finishing university.
And
It's just like, nobody else put him in check on this. And I can remember saying to him a couple times, like when I was in university, like, are you still bragging about reading a novel? A novel.
You put him in check for it when nobody else would.
It's not a work of political history. This is a novel that high school kids read while they're still in high school. All right, and you are lying. You're lying to yourself and others that you're reading it. And I know you're not reading it because it doesn't take 8 years to read this novel. It's just not reasonable. And you're boasting about it like it's this huge accomplishment. Again, to me, this is really like comparable to the drug trip thing. Why would you be boasting about drug tourism? Why would you be boasting about flying to Costa Rica to get high on a hallucinogen? Why would anyone be boasting about cocaine, LSD, any of these drugs, right? You're boasting about reading this novel. I said to my father, you haven't even read it. Like, what, have you been reading 1 page a day or less? Like, I know you're not actually reading this novel. So, me and my father, we really had like zero communication for about 10 years, almost zero communication, right? And at the end of that time, so there's like a 10-year gap, and I said to him straight to his fucking face, I was like, oh yeah, how about Ulysses by James Joyce? When he finally read the novel, and I wonder if I guilt-tripped him into it, because I pointed out he'd been bragging to people about having read this novel for so many years. Are you finally going to read it? He had nothing to say. It's not that meaningful. It's just a novel. It's just a hit novel. Star Wars is just a hit movie. Lord of the Rings is just pulp fiction. I mean, get over it, okay? Getting high and hallucinating is just that. People come on the internet.
I have a question. We're all over the place now, apparently. What differentiates somebody posting an experience on their Instagram page to boasting? What differentiates? What line needs to be crossed where you're just talking about an experience that you had into boasting, 5 boasts.
Yeah, many boasts. It's implied if you're not saying that it was a poor experience or that you're in some way against it, most especially with the modern culture wherein it's expected of you to be protesting against whatever given thing you happen to take interest in. So, I mean, it's implied that it's a boast if you posted it for the public to see.
Boast your butt. Boast
But,
whatever
I mean,
the fuck you want. It's her Instagram page.
I think perhaps we should try to take into account the fact that boasting is intended to be a good thing to be done when you feel good about having done something.
What a piece of shit.
But I think we're like a minute away from him getting around to why he's at the very least equating it in that way. I want to hit all of these at once, and we'll wrap it up on that because you're wasting too much time here, man.
Let's continue.
God, you're killing me.
People come on social media, and they promote this stuff. They propound this stuff. They lie to themselves. They lie to others. They have no interest in the scientific reality of brain damage, of what are the effects in the brain that bring about this hallucination, right? And they ascribe to it this kind of false philosophical profundity. You can't wait to be home and see how the lessons I've learned impact my day-to-day. You wouldn't feel some humility about that? You wouldn't feel some sense of shame? What if this drug tourism really did impact your day-to-day life? Wouldn't that be sad? Wouldn't you have to look back on that with regret? Like, wow, I changed my day-to-day life.
There's so many things. So, she should feel shame because you think she should feel shame and regret and bad about something that she is basically saying had a positive effect on herself.
Right. Wouldn't it be sad if it had a lasting effect?
Right. Well,
I mean,
why?
unless, of course, that was indeed the intention of doing it, which is like, as I tried to explain to you before, nobody does this if they don't feel they need to.
Like, it's not for fun.
This is not a recreational, for funsies, you know, happy-go-lucky drug. You like trip out and have a good time. You're faced with very serious and yes, deeply profound challenges, and indeed attached thereon opportunities by this particular experience, the likes of which you obviously couldn't possibly have the first fucking clue as to any measure of comprehension regarding, like, I know for a fact, I'm not even going to say that it's like you've convinced me here, it's become severely evident that you don't even have a clue. You have no idea what you're talking about, how not only incorrect you are about all of it, but how just, like, backward. I mean, where the fuck do you think people came up with the very concept of what is or is not profound? Where do you think people came up with ideas like, hey, you know, what's the meaning of life and how do we go about finding it? Maybe there is a meaning of life. Well, something seems meaningful. It comes from this, dude. It comes from exploring the psyche. I mean, that's what it fucking means. There is no other, and I mean, you've kind of strung up a series of values here, essentially. You've sort of put all the pieces in place to just fall over perfectly now at this point.
Yeah, the art, the honorability and morality of such a thing, the profound experience or lack thereof of people you don't even fucking know. There's a lot going on here, but I gotta say my favorite part is the super belittling juvenile girl voice.
Yeah, I want to hear a little bit more of that before we wrap this up. But I mean, you've wrapped this up on your own. I get that you don't see any meaning in this, but I'm gonna go ahead and tell you your fucking life story here, bub. Like, yeah, I want to hear he reads that little piece of.
Are you 10? Like, I don't understand.
I mean, he could
why
be 10.
A grown man
you
would
could be
do that.
Very childish, and it would be a hell of a lot better reflecting upon you than what it actually is here.
Really, really crazy.
Basis of a drug trip, on the basis of something that is no better than huffing glue, getting a concussion, or coming down with tropical fever. Guys,
there's a new one. So now we've got in the comparison category, tropical fever.
Okay, so now still to play devil's advocate and be somewhat, I mean, we're going to try to be as fair as possible here, but...
does tropical fever affect your serotonin levels in your brain?
For God's sake, let's be reasonable human beings. When you fucking do something so outrageous, it just... You got it coming, man. People are going to be unfair with you because you made it impossible for them to have any sense of respect for you on this issue. And I mean, I'm going to be fair, and I'll say that you could say again that perhaps being in a state of such unwellness, such as a car crash, a concussion, or coming down with a severely dangerous, I mean, your body knows what that is. When it hits you, your body knows, oh shit, we're in fucking trouble. And it may very well activate the same sort of a response, thereby dumping DMT in your system.
But it doesn't just go away in a couple of hours.
Mm-mm.
There's so many reasons why all of these comparisons are just very willy-nilly kind of put together without any kind of thought behind it.
Slipshod, for sure. This is not the work that I would expect from you, sir.
Yeah, the metaphors here between these two things that have just imaginary connections or relations it's a little...
Yeah, at least by my standard, the only frame of reference in which a human being is actually hallucinating. When you start making shit up in your imagination and declaring that it's real somehow because you say so, that's called a delusion, sir.
It's imagined. I got you.
Trust me, tropical fever causes hallucinations no better and no worse than taking these drugs. It's all you're doing is inducing illness. You're making yourself sick to experience a mental state that comes about with a whole wide range of infections. Okay, a whole wide range of illnesses.
Point Eisel, you're actually correct about that.
Oh, wouldn't that be great?
That is the only time in the entirety of this video that you were actually correct. That
Infections
you stated
and
a
illnesses?
fact. No, but where he said that it's triggering a hallucinatory state by effectively poisoning yourself. Yes, that's what you're doing with dimethyltryptamine.
Yeah, but you don't get infections.
No.
And you
No.
don't
Well,
get deathly ill from doing ayahuasca.
He's
it
stating
wears
that
off
as regards the
after
other
a couple
things.
of hours.
Well, I mean, he might be stating it as regards the other thing, and if he is stating it about the DMT, we'll just attach that so that I can go ahead and give him the point. But if you do mean that, no. I mean, I'm wondering where you would get these ideas. Is that? I hope that's not what you said.
Again, your brain is already making DMT.
Yeah,
So,
like, I mean, what gives you the idea that it's in some way dangerous or negative in any way, let alone infectious?
that was a weird word to throw in there.
Yeah, I think he was talking about the other shit.
Yeah, but it's still, if they're comparable, they're basically the same.
Yeah, which, mind you are setting up a whole slew of misguided associations here that are going to be hugely misleading for people who watch this, thinking of you as being sort of an expert in any field whatsoever. People who have enough respect for you. I mean, I have a great degree of respect for you, but I'm going to go ahead and state that I'm an honorable person, and so if I respect you, I'm going to be honest with you, and I'm going to tell you when you are just being a fucking obnoxious humiliation.
That's the false equivalencies.
Yes,
are bothering me a little bit.
It's not, it's just, you're not doing, I mean, ultimately, what if you were right about any of this? Can you go ahead and give me some indication of what positive effect you'd be achieving? What good would you be doing for anybody? Are you helping out this girl that you've effectively labeled a crackhead for no good reason on the fucking internet in front of... you have a relatively large audience, man. Of course, though I could say we have by that standard, a relatively small audience, and I'm going to venture to guess the reason being because the people who, the sort of fanboy peeps who are going to watch your videos, say like this one, and just kind of let it slide, if not actually, kind of invest in it to some degree, are the sort of people that we tend to kind of go about getting rid of because they're useless. And if those are the people that are watching your channel, I mean, I guess I can understand pandering to them if that's what you're doing. I can't really bring myself to believe that this is something that you are actually presenting as a work of your own, an invested work of your own accord that is somehow, at least seems to be like you're proud of it, like you think you've done something here, like you're enthusiastic about this one, man. Like you actually seem to think that you are like saying something that has any value whatsoever, other than that what is damaging to anybody who watches it without the sight to see how fucking stupid and bullshit it is.
It's not damaging to himself. He's moral and honest and...
How could he be? He's better than everyone else.
Vegan and better and would never take any kind of drugs. AKA not a crackhead. Alright, let's continue.
It's taught to you by a drug trip. My relationship with cooking feels totally renewed after a long time wondering if I even wanted to keep making food-related content. Maybe you should take a good long look at how meaningful or how meaningless your life is.
That's
You
one.
know what?
Yeah,
Maybe you
so-
had a solid intuition there. Maybe you were suspecting that there's something more to life than uploading these banal, meaningless cooking videos. And no. You took a vacation and you got high on drugs, and now you're reassured that this is something really meaningful to do with life. What a self-serving delusion. Boy, you sure got what you
Oh,
paid for.
dude,
So
really?
what makes her cooking videos any less meaningful than the videos that he makes?
Why do you have to do that, man? I mean, things were going relatively well. Like I could have gone back
What
and
differentiates?
like,
What's more meaningful?
I could have said, you know, things will turn around. He'll get this message and it'll change his mind to some extent. Maybe he can figure things out. But you crossed a line there.
That's so weird.
That it's like there's no coming back from that one.
Well,
And I thought you had it all set up to kind of cap off the video, but now you've gone ahead and set it all up to just result in your failure ultimately. And I'm sorry, man. I apologize in advance.
there's a lot of presumption here. You know, the presumption that he gets to decide what's so meaningful about his YouTube channel in comparison to other people's. You know what I mean?
I mean, taking that.
Who cares? So she likes to make cooking videos. I don't see why that's a negative thing or why she should be belittled or judged for it.
Yeah, taking that particular, I guess you could say, purported frame of context into account, I'd love to hear you give me any answer whatsoever to the question, what precisely the fuck gives you any idea that you are in any way qualified to make even an assessment of this, let alone present yourself as though you have some measure of expertise on a matter that you've just gone ahead and proven so far beyond any shadow of a doubt that you do not know anything at all about. Like, you're flat out bullshitting. You're not even wrong, you're just incorrect. Like, you are obviously, you never even bothered looking into it. Because, I mean, there are so many things here that you would never dare to have said had you actually known any fucking thing at all about what you're talking about. And you did it all just to mock this fucking girl because she's part of your atheist
circuit. It really doesn't have much to do with the ayahuasca thing.
It has to do with your relationship to your father.
It seems kind of personal
and
with this chick.
Your relationship to this vegan stance that you've taken, which is largely not even proper. Like, vegans do not tend to want to combat natural resources, especially if they can help people in some way or another, most especially if they can get people off of synthetic compounds that are addictive. I mean, it's just there are so many ways in which this is blatantly wrong of you to be doing on so many different levels, and then you go so far as to cross the line into the territory wherein you point out yet again another scenario wherein you are obsessing over particularly a vegan cooking YouTuber and suggesting that her channel is banal and even, did he say meaningless or pointless or something? Like, I mean, I guess if nothing holds any meaning because you're too fucking stupid to see it, then it would be meaningless. But ultimately what she's doing there is cooking food, so it's amounting to something that at least plays to some degree, whereas you are just flat out lying to people and then calling her a liar. Like, when did she lie about anything?
The whole thing is, I think, and I'll venture to guess here, that it's got more to do with kind of putting this chick like in her place, so to speak,
right,
with the juvenile girl voice and obsessively. Like, yeah, maybe her cooking channel doesn't really have that much meaning for you or me or him personally.
It has meaning for me.
But, like,
that's a given.
If it does for somebody, like, why does that make her a piece of shit? Because she has a cooking channel.
And I mean, obviously, it has meaning for somebody, but I mean, for me, I can say,
even if it's just
for certain,
her alone,
it does hold meaning for me because there is meaning present in everything. If you just look at it instead of, like, I don't know what you're doing here. Like, are you trying to convince yourself of something? because I mean, this is not going to patch up your relationship with your father. Okay, it's not going to change the way that things turned out there. And no, it's not because he was a liar about some book that he failed to read, and I guess what, you were disappointed in him, or no, what I actually, what I'm seeing there, the indications that I'm seeing there, and I'm going to go ahead and tell you, even first thing, that this is my assessment via synchronicity. Okay, so if you don't believe in synchronicity because the fucking atheist told you not to, and you don't really have any thoughts of your own, then I'm going to make some attempt at trying to prove it to you here, because I fucking guarantee you I'm right about this. This obsession with this instance regarding your father, as though it relates in any way to anything on YouTube at all, it points out this the similar relationship that I had with my father, wherein, you know, other people would not really call him out or put him in his place regarding mistakes that he made. Of course, in the case of, as regards my father's mistakes, it was something less akin to lying about a book and more towards kind of, you know, beating the shit out of my mother and I, and getting deadpan drunk every night to the point where he's hallucinating, and maybe, you know, seeing fit to throw bricks through our windows in the middle of the night, that sort of thing. And so, you know, eventually I did call him out on this, and I did put him in his place, and I felt pretty good about that. And I mean, I'm not sure if that is really objectively a good thing to have done, considering that it really didn't make much of a difference at that point, except
it made a difference
make me
in
feel,
you. Yeah,
it
that's
made me
the
feel
difference.
more accomplished, better about myself. But I
More
mean, in like in a
confident.
vengeance capacity.
An exercise in courage.
Yes, it was, and it did.
There's so many things.
It reclaimed the value that he had stolen from me as a child,
Absolutely.
I suppose you could say.
So
but
it didn't affect his behavior, but that doesn't mean it had no effect or no meaning.
right. I mean, but I mean, that's me saying, as it seemed, the questions I have about that particular instance up until now, wherein I come to find that in fact it did have a great deal of meaning, because it just pointed out what you've been doing this whole time and why. See, the association that that makes to my father of this experience in and of itself also points out several occasions on which you have behaved, indeed even sounded like, and used the very same kind of misappropriated terminology that my father would when he was seriously drunk, and shortly thereafter, because he indeed had incurred brain damage from over drinking.
Absolutely.
And I'm gonna just go out on a limb and just for you know, it's just a good thing to do this regardless whether you think it might be true or not, but it might be a good idea for you to get checked out by a doctor, because it could very well be the case that you indeed have brain damage, and this whole rant you're throwing here is a desperate attempt by that inner workings of yourself to get that message through to you. Like something's trying to shout out and indicate, hey, something's wrong here. It's an idea. It could very well be the case. As I stated, I'm going to bet on it, because, I mean, synchronicity usually
meaningless,
works out.
Remember.
On my end, it's rarely a failure.
Yeah.
And, I mean, that's what I'm seeing. That's the intuition I'm getting, because, I mean, nobody talks like that. You're the only other person, aside from my father, I've ever seen make such particular mistakes and in such a way, and I'm going to bet that you didn't even notice it happening after having rewatched the video even.
I think we're going to have to wrap this up, but I would like to say that I'm going to find this Sarah chick on Instagram, and we're going to pimp the fuck out of her cooking channel.
Yeah, she deserves it, at least, for having been fucking shit on by this.
If not only just to do it.
Right. I mean, just because it's generally a good thing to do, to be positive and promotional to anyone, really. I mean, in fact, we are going to continue to be positive and promotional to you. If you do need help along those lines, you know, I'm here. I will help you in any way that I can. I heavily suggest getting checked out by a doctor first thing. Second, I mean, just... It's gonna. I apologize for being so mean here, but coming down to fucking flat out lying to people about this and bullshitting, in fact lying to yourself even, it seems, to making a video that largely didn't really even amount to making much of any sense whatsoever, other than to kind of scream out to people this I guess sort of what's the word when you have a repressed message of you, for whatever reason, seeing fit to actually take a personal interest in childishly mocking a very young girl for doing something that is generally regarded by, I guess I'd say, everyone other than you as being a good thing, if not an excellent thing. Where you did do we missed the part where you did the mocking voice as regards her anxiety, where she said that she had an anxiety problem and that she went to this resort and she freaked out the first day.
Figured out that she can get through stuff if she just keeps trying.
She said that she can get through she said that she can figure anything out if she just keeps trying, whereupon you mocked her a second time after having used that ridiculous child. Like, that's the worst thing you can do, man.
He equated basically her saying that if she just kept trying as being some kind of crutch for being, like, addicted to ayahuasca or whatever, when really all she was saying is that, like, she's just going to keep trying in her life and not give up.
Right,
and that makes her a piece of shit.
I mean, there's really only one thing that you can do that's worse in any given situation than giving up, and that's going to be deliberately sabotaging any chances for success, which is what you've managed to accomplish here thoroughly. So, I mean, as I was saying about the childish voice thing, don't do that again. That's really bad. That makes you look terrible, man. It's like there's no good reason for you to ever do that, most especially to anyone that's younger or lesser successful than you are. So just don't, please.
It's just a juvenile kind of.
It's very juvenile kind of. It's not even just a juvenile, but it's like obnoxiously. It's the sort of thing that anybody can agree is just not a good idea.
I would be interested to see a remake of this particular video after you've tried ayahuasca and without the mocking and belittling girly voice.
Oh yeah.
I feel like that could be very
really
interesting.
There was no reason for you to have even brought that girl into the equation except for this fixation that you have for any YouTuber that cooks vegan food. But and how much smarter you are than them, which I mean is evidently not the case by any measure. I mean, the girl was smart enough to go and do this ayahuasca ceremony, which is what you should have been doing when you just jump to these conclusions. But again, as I suggested on Instagram, yes, I would have to suggest that you do, in fact, at the very least, take a shot at experiencing to some degree, just some, if not, all of the things that you intend to give your expert opinion on to the negative.
It would definitely boost the credibility a little bit.
Right, you're really damaging your own
subjects.
credibility here, most especially considering that you're finding it's almost as though you were like really trying your best to make every possible mistake in this video, and all of that thereby becomes associated with the fact that you are kind of professing your incredulity or your inability to be taken seriously in this regard. So I mean, there's that, but then there's the anxiety thing that she
wanted to use.
Right, you were as I said,
the experience to try and overcome her general anxiety.
Right, as I said, you went about mocking her for that.
Wow.
I mean, just straight out the gate, you mocked her for that. That's just, I'm not seeing why you would even think about that, but
piece of shit, she has anxiety.
The first thing you did in your attempt to mock her for that was just fuck up pretty horribly by saying that, well, she can just get through anything by trying. When she went to a resort, because she went to a resort and spent a few days at this lavish hotel being waited on, she can get through anything. Firstly, she didn't say get through anything. She said she can figure anything out, which is kind of a different sentiment in a manner of speaking. I mean, even if it weren't, at least you could kind of read what you're making fun of first.
He purposefully misinterpreted what she was trying to say by
Yeah.
her little lesson learned. And don't get me wrong, I feel like if that were me, and I have a couple experiences with those kinds of chemicals. I've never been to Costa Rica or did, like the whole thing with the shaman or whatever. But if that were me, I don't think I would find it necessary to kind of post like on Instagram while I'm there and like write out long paragraphs about, what I was doing and for what purpose. And obviously, but that's just my personal shit. I don't think that anybody is a piece of crap for wanting to share their experience.
Well, I mean, to speak on the other end of that equation, I can say that you wouldn't see any reason particularly to post that sort of thing unless, of course, it was in fact a fairly outstanding achievement for you personally, something that you were in fact very proud of doing. Now, where she mentions that she had a bit of a panic attack, but she was able to get over it and continue, and you thereafter mock her for having stayed at a resort hotel. Now, firstly, apparently this is new to her. It's like not something she's done before, and most especially if she has an anxiety or panic disorder. Now, I'm not going to state whether or not I know, if you have or have not ever experienced such things as an anxiety disorder or panic attacks. It doesn't really seem like you have, because firstly, there are a lot of things you would not be saying here had you, and B, it's just generally you probably wouldn't behave the way you do overall. Your general sense of presence is kind of like unfoundedly arrogant in a manner of speaking, at the very least somewhat, coming across narcissistic to an extent, which is not something you see often in people who have in fact actually suffered from these particular conditions, because regardless of how anxious or nervous you may have become before and how much that makes you an expert on that condition, I assure you, if you have not experienced a genuine panic attack or anxiety disorder, really, it's kind of terrible form for you to be saying anything about it other than that you feel sorry for that person, because it is very, very difficult to get through. When you have just your body going ape shit, emergency mode, dumping every fucking useful chemical in your system all at once in a concerted effort to keep you alive from some unknown danger that you can't see or experience, but it's there and you know it because it feels like your body's shutting the fuck down on you, and you have no idea why. I mean,
there's like respiratory issues, you can't breathe.
You can be damaged. Your brain thinks that you are in serious danger, and
like instinctual DNA, like running from like a lion or some
it's
shit.
Like it's terribly
like,
exacerbated fight or flight mode. It's almost as though your brain somehow begins to, gets itself around thinking that you have, for all intents and purposes, like been stabbed or something, like you're dying.
Can you believe that Sarah's parasympathetic nervous system would be such a piece of crap?
Right, but it's
so ridiculous.
Actually, that draws a unique parallel in that, though, that we can say for anybody watching this that is actually interested in investing time in learning something and gaining knowledge. And not lying about it, but that could very well be a correlated factor. Now, I've stated on several occasions that where it comes to making use of the Kundalini impulse, it is in fact the same condition as having a panic attack. It's controlled, and it's kind of, you could say it's sustained in a manner of speaking, and it is controlled in the sense that it can be diminished or even exacerbated depending on how you choose to use it. But whatever the case, essentially it's the same thing as experiencing a panic attack, only in the context where you are not afraid of it because you understand it and in fact are doing it manually for a purpose. It boosts your system. It dumps the chemicals that are used in your fight or flight scenario, such as dopamine, adrenaline, testosterone. It generally makes you stronger, faster, more alert. So it's kind of like a super booster that you can make use of if you've managed to unlock this what it's supposed to be. It's a natural function. I mean, really, you get it stuck up, and it's from pollution, generally speaking. Anybody who hasn't been keeping up. In any case, I've also noted that the experience of tapping into that Kundalini impulse was the only time I have ever experienced something of the like so very similar to the experience of using dimethyltryptamine. Thereby, and of course I've already hypothesized that perhaps people who are having panic or anxiety disorders, it's not necessarily that it's so similar or that it works by the same functions, but perhaps it is indeed a symptom of the same condition, that these people are in some way prematurely unlocking that impulse, or the impulse is kind of fighting to cut loose in them, whatever the case. I do believe that people who have anxiety attacks and panic attacks are in fact experiencing, you could say, a taste of that impulse unlocking or tapping into it, and just they don't know that that's what's happening, and of course their brain is going apeshit on them, trying to convince them that all manner of horrors are transpiring. So generally speaking, I mean, it's kind of like the worst fucking experience you could ever have, and it comes from out of nowhere at random all the time. So really, for you to say that she has no place saying that she can get through anything because she stayed at a resort hotel for a few days, dude, before I got a handle on this condition, had I gone to a resort hotel, I probably wouldn't have survived, honestly.
You wouldn't have survived a road trip to Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I wouldn't have gone camping, dude, in the fucking wilderness alone. I would not have taken myself out of my immediate and secure comfort zone under any conditions once I became aware that that was in fact a condition that I had, you know, after like the first 3 times that I experienced it just at school for no reason, up out of nowhere. No fucking way. That's a terrifying thing to have to go through. And I mean, just bottom line is, it doesn't matter what this girl does. I'm proud of her for doing it. If she's beaten that, if she's up against that, and she's making any headway and getting through it in a beneficial and positive manner.
Why not?
Just for you to go about kind of trying to mock her, albeit terribly, terribly failing, trying to mock this girl that I'm sure you don't even know. It's just that she's a part of your community.
You can't be sure of that.
But I mean, it tends to be, that's the pattern he's following, is that anybody who's in the vegan community,
But we don't know.
it seems to be anybody that's in the vegan community, really. Like, they don't even have to be food bloggers. You contest and in fact assert yourself as being so vastly superior to them that you feel the need to make a whole string of videos putting them down to the best of your abilities. Like, that's very indicative of a problem with you, man, that should really be addressed.
Well,
I mean,
sometimes it's called for, you know, I mean, when people say
yeah, there are some
shit or whatever.
Right. There are some people he's taken out of play that were pretty
whatever.
influential to the negative.
That's not what we're talking about.
So perhaps you got hooked on that. Maybe you just got hooked on you know, fighting the good fight and decided to just fight any fight, even if it's like not even called for. I guess it's a possibility. Whatever the case, it's indicative of something wrong with you, period. And it's very humiliating. It's embarrassing me. It's embarrassing to have you out there just behaving this way, especially. Basically, you're fighting against anything that, like, everything that's to be regarded as a positive endeavor here, you kind of spit at and missed, but like desperately attempted to damage anything that could be considered, you know, righteous or good or of a beneficial nature. Mind you, nature. You're a vegan. You're not an atheist. You can stop dismissing everything that seems spiritual to you, and you can start actually kind of supporting nature, generally speaking. That would be a good idea. That's my recommendation for you. With that video you just did, that was just a fucking mistake and a half, like a whole slew of them. Like, just a very, very bad move. I'm sorry that we were so mean in response, but fuck me, dude. You sent that to me like you thought you were doing something smart, I guess. So what the fuck were you thinking? Man, you made me do this. I can say that, just at least, you know, my
It hurts me more than it hurts you.
it does. He seems to feel good about it, dumbass.
Well,
That was stupid, man.
In any case, we are going to have to wrap it up.
Oh, yeah, okay, well, let's wrap it up, but just, I want to say, I mean, I guess I can't stop him, and he has this tendency, but, I mean, we are still going to be supportive of you, and we do want to see you
Yes,
make
you
better
said
content, and we absolutely do intend to work with you, so please don't fucking just hate us and run away, because, I mean, I'm going to be honest with you, man. I'm going to be genuine. I'm going to try to help you as best I can, and you need help with this, because that was a very stupid thing for you to have done. It makes you look like a fucking imbecile. And you are not an imbecile. You are a terribly intelligent person who has a huge amount of potential that is just amazing to me. When I first saw you, I was hugely impressed. And I want to feel that way again. And I want other people to feel that way watching your videos. I absolutely do not want people to feel the way that I've had to feel watching this video. I very highly suggest you delete it immediately. That's a fucking stain upon your career, man. That was a very bad move. It's damaging to you, lasting, like in the long run. So, get rid of that. Study into things you intend to talk about, at least like to some small amount. Like know anything at all about them that's factual. And what's the third one? Oh yeah, don't hate us. I mean. We can be very helpful to you if you just, you know, take a chance on kind of being, I don't know, cool with people to some extent. Take a shot at it. I mean, I guess maybe you never had any real friends or what. I mean, that's the sort of person you come across as. Maybe you were too busy being like, you know, so much vastly superior to everyone you come across. I don't know. I'm tired now, and that took it out of me. All I'm trying to say is we are trying to be friendly. I apologize for being a dickhead to you. I don't want it to come across like I'm like putting you down. I mean, I am putting you down, but in this case, it's very deserved and in fact necessary for you to grow the fuck up here.
So that's what we think.
Yeah, that's some of it anyway.
Sorry we didn't get through the whole thing. It was kind of long, and this dude rambles, as you can see.
I mean, especially when, like, there's so much more I could say about that. Like, you've told so much in that, and it's like,
Okay, everybody.
I don't want to embarrass you, man.
Have a wonderful evening.
Good
Thank
night.
you for
Thank
joining
you all
us.
for attending. Kila
Mwah.
Salai, Terry Uniciari, Nama fucking stay.
Love.